There was this police officer named Javert who watched as a bunch of prisoners worked hard to haul a big ship with some heavy ropes. After the task is done, Javert tells one of the prisoners, Jean Valjean, to go pick up a flag that's fallen down. Everyone was taken aback when Jean showed off his amazing strength by lifting the heavy flag and tossing it right at Javert's feet. Eventually, it comes to light that Jean Valjean has been granted conditional release. He got sentenced for stealing bread to feed his sister's hungry child. It started out as a 5-year sentence, but after a few escape attempts, it got bumped up to 19 years. Javert gives Jean a special document that he needs to keep with him all the time, or he risks getting arrested again. Jean is out there traveling around the country, looking for work and a place to stay, but it seems like everywhere he goes, his criminal record keeps him from getting a break. People think he's dangerous and won't even let him hang out in a regular stable. Feeling completely worn out, he decides to head to the church. There, he is noticed by a bishop who, out of kindness, invites Jean to dinner and allows him to stay the night. Jean happily takes in the hospitality, relishes the food and warmth, but later that night, he sneaks off with the bishop's silverware and makes his escape. In the morning, they catch him and bring him back. Everyone was surprised when the bishop mentioned that he gave the silver to Jean, and he even threw in 2 silver candlesticks for good measure. So he asks Jean to use this gift to turn his life around. These words really hit Jean hard. He chooses to begin anew with a fresh start. He rips up his parole papers and tosses them off a cliff. So 8 years go by. Jean's taken on quite the role, owning a factory and serving as the mayor of a town now. One day, he spots a woman named Fantine among the workers. She's judged for what she's done before. She has a daughter named Cosette, who wasn't born in the usual way. People tease Fantine, calling her out for her supposed bad choices, even though she tries to explain that the guy she loved just up and left her. The workshop's supervisor tries to flirt with Fantine, but she turns him down. So, in response, they let her go right away. Fantine is about to ask Jean for help when, out of nowhere, the police walk into the factory. So, Javert has taken on the role of chief inspector in town now. He doesn't quite recognize Jean, even though his face looks a bit familiar. Not long after that, a worker gets stuck under a cart. Jean comes to the rescue once more, demonstrating incredible strength. Javert starts to get a feeling that Jean might be the ex-prisoner he's been hunting for the last 8 years, but he still lacks solid proof. At the same time, Fantine is really struggling to find ways to get money to support her daughter. First, she sells a pendant featuring Cosette's portrait, then her hair, and eventually, she even parts with her teeth. But it just isn't enough yet. She has to go with the only choice she has left. Living on the streets really affects her health. So, there was this one day when a really upset customer started making a big fuss, and they ended up calling the police. So, Javert is about to arrest Fantine, but then Jean steps in to help her out. He finds out that she used to work for him and is eager to lend a hand. Fantine feels that Jean let her down by not standing up for her when she lost her job. She shares with him about her daughter, and Jean assures her that he will protect both her and Cosette. He takes Fantine to the hospital. Not long after, Javert gets a letter from Paris. A guy who looks a lot like Jean Valjean just got arrested. He shares it with Jean. Jean feels really upset. A guy who's innocent could end up facing some tough times because of him. He realizes he can't just stand by and let this injustice take place. So, at night, Jean heads to court and openly admits who he really is. But nobody believes him. He tells them to call for Javert, and then he heads back to the hospital to be with Fantine. That poor woman is running a fever. She's in a bit of a daze and keeps calling for her daughter. Jean reassures her, saying he'll track down Cosette and make sure she finds happiness. Upon hearing this, Fantine peacefully closes her eyes for the last time, filled with hope. Just then, Javert shows up to take Jean into custody. The hero realizes he can't go back to prison. He picks up a wooden stick to protect himself from Javert's sword, but the officer has way more experience. He swiftly takes the weapon away from Jean. So, Jean ends up having to make a run for it and leaps into this freezing river to dodge getting caught. So, it turns out that little Cosette, who is Fantine's daughter, is staying with the Thénardier family as their foster child. They make her work as a servant. The foster parents deceived Fantine, claiming that Cosette was sick and asking for money for her care, even though the girl was perfectly healthy. The Thénardier's daughter is all decked out like a princess, while poor Cosette is stuck in rags, living in a stable and doing all the tough work. Jean stumbles upon the Thénardier's tavern, and that's where he lays eyes on Cosette for the very first time. He lends a hand to help her with the heavy bucket of water and gently breaks the sad news about her mother's passing. Jean wants to take the girl with him, but the Thénardiers are not keen on letting her go since they rely on her work. They act like they care about her, but are really just asking for money for the medical bills. Jean takes care of Fantine's imaginary debt, going above and beyond what was requested. That's when the couple finally lets him take Cosette. Not long after, Javert shows up at the tavern, still on the lookout for Jean, while the greedy Thénardier can't help but wish he had asked for even more cash. So, Jean and Cosette hop into a carriage and make their getaway. So, when they reach the city gates, the guards ask to check their documents. So, they have to run away, and right away, Javert starts chasing after them. Jean and Cosette use a rope to climb up a tall wall and successfully vanish from sight. The heroes are taking cover in a church. There, they run into a guy that Jean once helped out. He managed to get him out from under a heavy cart. The man, feeling grateful, decides to lend a hand by hiding Jean and Cosette from the police. 9 years go by. People in Paris are really struggling with poverty, and there's a lot of frustration with the monarchy. There are all sorts of political movements popping up in the country, and one of them is a youth group known as the Friends of the ABC. They're hoping for a revolution that will improve life. There's this young guy named Marius among them. He hails from a rich family, but he's cut ties with his relatives and is living in poverty now. His friend is Apennine, the daughter of the Thénardiers. She's had a crush on Marius for ages, but she just can't bring herself to tell him how she feels. One day, Marius spots Jean and the all-grown-up Cosette walking down the street. The young man falls head over heels for the girl while they're out helping those in need. So, the Thénardiers spot Jean too, and thinking about how they can make some money, they start cooking up another plan. Javert and his team show up again and break up the crowd. As Jean takes Cosette away, their eyes happen to lock with Marius. The young man is totally captivated. Later on, the Thénardiers tell the police that they've spotted Jean Valjean. Javert is on the move again, looking for him. So Marius is asking Apennine to check out where Cosette lives. So that night, the revolutionaries all meet up at a cafe. Marius is having a hard time focusing on the uprising plans since his mind keeps drifting to Cosette. His friends are giving him a hard time, and the group leader, Enjolras, isn't too happy that Marius is losing focus on their mission. Before long, the community finds out about the passing of the one official who truly cared for the less fortunate. This is what ignites the revolution. As the rebels get ready for battle, Apennine hands Marius Cosette's address. The young guy quickly heads out to meet the girl. Looks like Cosette has been thinking about him too. She still remembers that look. With Jean and Cosette having to stay hidden, their life is pretty limited. That night, the girl steps out into the garden and runs into Marius. They instantly fall in love with each other. Apennine, watching them from a distance, can't help but feel a wave of jealousy wash over her. Before long, Jean shows up in the garden and tells Cosette to head back to the house. Marius is hiding and ends up grabbing a handkerchief that the girl dropped by mistake. So, at that moment, Thénardiers and his crew are hatching a plan to break into Jean's house. Apennine gives a loud warning to Cosette and Jean about the danger ahead. With all the noise going on, the police show up, and the criminals have to make a run for it. Jean knows that Javert is going to track him down soon. He tells Cosette that they need to head to England right away. The girl pleads to stay, but Jean sticks to his decision. Cosette writes a note for Marius and leaves it by the gate before she heads out. Apennine discovers it. She keeps it from Marius and says that Cosette has gone missing. Marius rushes over to his sweetheart's place, but when he arrives, it's empty. Then he goes back to his revolutionary buddies. Apennine puts on boys' clothes and teams up with the rebels. The young people come together at the barricades, getting ready to stand their ground. The following day, they pause a funeral procession, lift flags, and belt out songs celebrating freedom and justice. More and more folks are joining them. In the midst of the crowd, there's Javert, acting like one of the revolutionaries so he can keep an eye on things. Before long, you can hear gunfire starting up. The army is launching an attack. The rebels are putting together barricades using furniture and other stuff that the townspeople are tossing to them from their windows. Enjolras comes to the conclusion that they need a scout. Javert steps up, still playing the part of a friend, and feeds the rebels some misleading info. One of the guys spills the beans on him. Javert gets caught. A new intense battle is about to kick off. The city streets become a battleground. Marius hurries over with a barrel of gunpowder, ready to defend the barricade against the soldiers. One of the attackers is targeting him. Apennine jumps in front to shield the person she cares about. She's hurt. In her final moments, the girl hands Marius Cosette's letter and shares her feelings. Marius jots down a response and asks one of the young revolutionaries to take it over to Cosette. But Jean catches it first. After reading the letter, he makes up his mind to head to the barricades to save Marius. In a soldier's uniform, Jean blends in with the rebels. Initially, they believe he's a spy and end up tying him up next to Javert. So, Jean comes to the rescue by noticing some snipers up on a rooftop. They start to trust him. Jean is asking if he can personally punish Javert. By himself, he decides to untie his old foe and set him free. Jean is trying to show that he's a good guy with this act. Javert heads out, and Jean shoots his gun into the air to make it seem like an execution is happening. The next morning, Marius sees that the rain has ruined all the explosives, making them unusable. Looks like we're running low on ammunition, and a lot of folks have headed back home. It's just the young fighters holding the line at the barricades now. They choose to battle it out until the very end. One of the youngest revolutionaries sneaks out from hiding to grab some bullets. This just makes the rebels even more determined. The fight goes on. The army's using cannons, and the barricade just falls apart. There aren't many revolutionaries left these days. They're trying to find shelter in homes, but the locals are too scared to let anyone in. Marius gets hurt and passes out. Jean, putting everything on the line, hoists the young man onto his shoulders and makes a daring escape through the sewers. So, Enjolras and the rest of his crew are holed up in this old, abandoned building, trying to keep safe. They eventually get found, but even when staring death in the face, Enjolras holds on tight to the flag. Jean makes his way through the dark, flooded tunnels with Marius in his arms. He runs into Thénardier in a passage. A guy snatches a precious ring right off Marius' hand. Feeling completely worn out, Jean finally spots an exit. So, Javert is just hanging around, waiting for him. Jean pleads to be allowed to take Marius to the hospital, assuring that he will surrender afterward. Javert nods in agreement and then takes the plunge into the river himself. Marius wakes up and finds out what went down. He's looking to find his rescuer, but first, he runs into Cosette. Seeing his adopted daughter happy, Jean makes the decision to leave. He shares the truth about himself with Marius and gives his blessing for them to get married. Marius says he'll keep the secret safe. The young couple ties the knot, but Cosette can't help but notice that Jean is missing, and she starts to feel anxious. So, at the wedding, the Thénardiers show up acting like they're just guests, but really, they're there to swipe something. Marius sees them and attempts to shoo them off. Thénardier confesses that he witnessed Jean saving the young man and reveals the stolen ring. Marius finally figures out who it was that saved him. Cosette, and they find Jean and thank him for being so kind. The hero is really glad to see his daughter again. She's feeling happy, and now he can go from this world with peace in his heart. Jean Valjean's spirit is with all those who sacrifice their lives for their dreams and for freedom.